Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the Cat and Sam show. And how are you today, Cat?
I am doing fabulous, Sam. I get to have some time and you get to talk about, language around and feelings around leaving these relationships.
Yes. So we were talking about rebirth, weren't we? And about the process of that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean that it's a smooth ride. And I think, like you were saying, people don't realise that, it's not a case of you just leave. It's not a case of you just report to the police and then everything's sorted. It's far from that. Even if you do report, even if they are held to account. That in this country, that can be 2 to 3 years before you even get to trial. So it's a long time, a ridiculously long time. They're talking about trying to get specialist domestic abuse courts so that's all the courts deal with. There's been a trial of some of them, but that's all the courts deal with, and it's quicker, and it also frees up space for the other crimes that happen. Even though domestic abuse, as the Domestic Abuse Commissioner put it, was the core business of the police over here. It's what takes up, it's the biggest, most commonly committed crime. But yeah, I liked what you were saying around the emotions of it as well, and the things that you go through before you get to that stage of hope or light.
Well, I think it's a lot like grief in that you go through a big range. I don't even think that's a word, but a big range of different emotion. I mean, you can be feeling so relieved that you're not trapped in something that is so volatile, and so thankful that you're not in that situation. And it can flip really quick to like a text or a phone call or a bang at the door or somebody having some kind of aggression that triggers you right back into what you just left. So I think, that feels chaotic, or you're exhausted because you can't sleep. And in rifling through my thoughts while I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of all the different emotions that, I felt people say, oh, I don't like being called a victim. I don't want to be thought of as a victim. And, your support system that you thought would be backing you is like, this is too much for me, or you just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going. You're being ridiculous. And there's just a lot of dismissal. And
yeah, I think it's hard for people to understand that you've, and in terms of sort of feelings as well, it's interesting around this language, that people don't know they're being abused. And I used that myself. What I did, I knew everything. It took me ages to be able to figure it out, not of what happened, but how to express it. And there's new CPS guidelines that have just been brought out for post-separation abuse in this country just on a couple of days ago. And actually, I think they've worded it really well. And I think a lot of it is around being able to process, because you've been kept in a state where the only thing you have felt is fight or flight and survival for so long, is that, I don't know about you, but I almost felt quite numb in the other feelings, in terms of how to feel positive feelings again. So I felt grief, I felt sadness, I've been through periods of regret, and I think a lot of survivors and targets feel this, especially when they leave, when they've survived leaving and they haven't been murdered or driven to suicide. When you step out of it and we're led to believe there's this huge support system for us, and it's not there. We have police failings, CPS failings, especially in terms of justice and things. It's about processing. It's about having the time and the support to process. And so those feelings, that was it. And then, so when you step outside and you've survived all of these things and you've got out the other side, and one of the things that I think is very hard for people to understand around you is when you've stepped away from it, and there isn't the support, so there's not the safety for your children, you haven't got the legal support, you haven't got the social care support that you need in order to keep safe and to keep your children safe. I think there can also be regret around leaving and thinking, actually, I would have been safer had I stayed. And I think that's really difficult for people to understand, that is a real thing, that sometimes being in the eye of the storm feels like it would have been safer to do, because leaving and that initial period that people say around 1 to 2 years of being buffered and being able to get back on your feet. So whether that's with legal bufferings like non-molestation orders, or they're in prison, or friends or family just giving you that breathing space to process all of the emotions that you've had from the relationship, in inverted commas, and afterwards, other than just pure survival. So there's a lot of emotions to go through, and grief is massive. You've lost so much, and it's not just about the other person, but you'll have lost your way of being, you'll have lost your previous life, you'll have lost possibly your health, your home, your career. There's so much loss involved in it. So there is an awful lot to grieve. And also the loss of the future that they faked, that they got you to buy into,
Yeah. I was going to go into, when you said that about, the loss of what they gave you, the person leaving also, because of the manipulation, has gone into what their fantasy of what that looked like and what others saw. And I think also too, I think maybe we could wrap it up with this one is, when people aren't, when you don't allow people in because it's too ridiculous for you to talk about what's really going on, and you leave and you allow people in so that you can get the support that you need, and they can't see that person the way that you see it, because they always saw this person as being very kind or very considerate or always so giving in front of them or always so kind. And so there's also that trying to get people to understand who that person really is, not who they want you to believe they are. Because in reality, you're really not the only one that's been gaslighted.
No. No, you're not. And this is the thing, the people around them. And in a way, I think this is why victims sort of like, can't you see what I see? And of course you can't, because actually we've been in a quite privileged position. We've seen behind the mask. We know who they really are. We know what they really are. And it takes a little while, but then you start to realise that actually there is a rebalancing of power in that knowledge of the fact that you do know who they are, so they're not going to get to you again. You get to a point eventually where you understand their patterning, you understand their predictability, you understand that actually it was never anything to do about you as an individual or as a person, and everything to do with them as somebody who abuses.
Yeah, and if we take it a little bit further in the thing that we, the two of us have come into, which and I think you brought it up so brilliantly, about the post-traumatic stress disorder and the complex post-traumatic stress disorder. In people coming back from war or people coming back from situations where they've had to survive, and the survival of somebody that really worked to get out of a domestic violence relationship to make their life better, you're really going to judge them for being whatever verbiage you want to put on them, not strong enough, weak, a victim, depending on what you view a victim to be. You might want to look at that. You might want to, give some thought to what you don't know, but maybe you could have some empathy around and give somebody
and
some
actually
support.
realizing that people who have been through this, the same as people think of veterans, are actually some of the strongest, most resilient, most creative in terms of survival people you will ever have the honour to know. That's what I've discovered. Every single one I've come across are phenomenal. Whatever stage they're in, giving them, we've said before, we both work with people at various different stages, and just being able to, as you say, hold space, but it's saying, you're okay, I hear you, I'm listening, and I hear what you're saying, and yes, you're right, and it's wrong, people shouldn't be doing this. They don't expect the world to come and pick them up and put them back together again. We will do it ourselves. We just need to stop being attacked first, and that's just normal. If you don't expect a soldier, if they're still being bombed, to start their recovery from having been to war. They have to be out of the field of fire.
You reminded me of something else that soldiers say a lot. Is we don't walk away from another soldier. We don't walk. We bring everyone home. So when you and I are talking to people on our own and out there in the world in our different ways of talking with people, and we take 5 or 10 minutes at the most in making sure that if somebody's approached us, and making sure that they understand that we get it, and they are the strongest. They just need somebody that says, yeah, I believe you. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, if you go here, these people will give you help. And the people that we surround ourselves with will give you help, because they know, and that's what community is about, and that's what care is about, and that's what compassion is about, and
connectivity, which we've talked about.
And connectivity, it's huge.
then maybe it's
So-
time for us to bring everybody home and just stop this all for good.
Yeah. And maybe it's time to connect with that bell and subscribe if you like what we have to say.
And thank you for being with us.
As always.
As always.